Hello, hello. This is going to be kind of a little experiment. I'm going to do the news and the news only for this stream. Going to end the stream and start another stream at 11, which is going to be my gaming, relaxing, chill time stream. So we'll see how it goes. I'm doing this mainly to make my content more YouTube friendly because um the news portion of my streams are typically like 2 3 4 hours long maybe, but the news section is only the first like 30 minutes to an hour. So I figure it'd be more helpful to people who just want to see the news, like my VODs, if they just have the 30 minutes to an hour of just the news and they don't have the it's less daunting when you only see 30 40 minute long video as opposed to 2 3 hours. What's up, Jenna? Speaking of Jenna, shout out to Jenna. Let me go ahead and check out the news that Jenna sent me. Because I have some, this is also going to be one of those winged streams because I had to work late again tonight and did not have a whole lot of time to prepare. Okay, so cool. I see one of these things is something that I already have queued up. Matt Gates. Okay, cool. I'm pulling up some more news. Thanks for the like, Wayne. I appreciate you, bruh. It's a long fucking day today. Ooh, that looks good. And it'll also be easier for me to adjust the description on YouTube. Oof. That should be a juicy one. All right, cool. I think I'm ready. I got plenty of news here. Shout out to Jenna for providing. This is a lot of news. This is a lot. I don't even know where to start with a lot of this. So I'll start off with Cuba since that's in the title. I got a couple of pieces from Jacobin here. Jacobin. All right. So let's see. I guess I'll read this one first. This one's by Ben Burgess, who you may know if you are a fan of political content on YouTube. I know I am. So this piece is titled "The U.S. Must End Its Brutal Sanctions Against Cuba and Not Intervene There," which is facts. Ben writes, as protests break out in Cuba, some politicians are calling for U.S. intervention. That would be a disaster. The best thing the United States can do to help the Cuban people is lift its brutal, inhumane embargo. On Sunday, the largest anti-government protests in at least 27 years broke out in Cuba. Thousands of people marched in the streets chanting slogans. Others overturned police cars or looted stores. It's far too early to make definitive pronouncements about the political character of these protests. Quite likely, the people in the streets represent a mixture of factions with very different complaints and long-term agendas. And that's the thing that I feel like is most important to get across about this whole situation, is that it's not the CIA doing a false flag, pretending to be protesting, and it's definitely absolutely not the people just protesting communism in Cuba. Right. It's it's a lot more nuanced than that. And anyone trying to tell you otherwise is a charlatan and a hack, and they don't know what they're talking about. So, one thing that is clear is that shortages in food, medicine, electricity, and other basic goods were the immediate spark for the protests. The stores that have been looted are controversial because they sell expensive products to foreigners who can pay a currency that most Cubans don't possess. American politicians who long to topple the Cuban government have been pointing to these conditions as they call for intervention. For example, Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings, who represents Florida, of course, Florida's 10th district, has linked the protesters' calls for freedom from disease, poverty, and corruption to the need for freedom from tyranny and dictatorship. To secure these freedoms, Demings argues the White House must move swiftly. So you have liberals, and this is yet another example where you scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds, right? You have suddenly on this one issue, the liberals and the conservatives who are making the bipartisan war hawk effort to decide to invade another sovereign country. Thank you for the like, Joe. And she tweeted, oh, how unfortunate. She tweeted, America stands for freedom. We must stand with the peaceful demonstrators in Cuba as they struggle for theirs. Not only freedom from tyranny and dictatorship, but freedom from disease, poverty, and corruption. The White House must move swiftly. Freedom shall and must prevail. And it's at this point, and they might mention it, and I think they do mention it in the next paragraph, but just really quick, I'm going to say that a lot of that has to do with the U.S. embargo of Cuba. The U.S. literally does not allow Cuba to participate in the world economy. And in that respect, Cuba is kind of a success story in that they've been able to last as long as they have while being literally fucking encircled by the United States, the most powerful military country in the world. So piece continues, but what sort of swift action does she want Joe Biden to take? She can't mean that the United States should impose crippling economic sanctions on Cuba, or that it should support and provide sanctuary to terrorists who carry out bombings and assassinations on the island. All of that's been happening since the Kennedy administration. It's hard to see what's left on the table except direct military intervention, and that's, what I was saying. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez has been more explicit. The people of Cuba, he says, need some sort of international help, including intervention from the United States in some form or fashion, whether it's food, medicine, or militarily. You wouldn't have to send them medicine or food if you just let them get food and medicine from other countries in the world, but Yeah, and I was just going to say this as well, but he beat me. Wasn't the embargo lifted like 5 years ago? Yeah, and Trump put it back in place. Hang on. Let me pull that up for you. So there's this really quick. I won't read it. I'll just show you. Trump hits Cuba with new sanctions in waning days. So that happened. Let me see if I can find anything else. United States embargo against Cuba. I'll just read this wiki if I can find it really quick. 2000. On November 8th, 2017, it was announced that U.S. President Donald Trump's administration had enacted new rules which would reinforce the business and travel restrictions which were loosened by the Obama administration and would go into effect on November 9th. So that's what happened. Cuba has a long and heroic track record of shipping medical aid to other nations, and at this point I should remind everyone that the life expectancy in Cuba is greater than in the United States of America. The literacy rate is higher. Like, I could go on, but sending food or medicine to the island during its own crisis would be an excellent idea, especially since U.S. policy is one of the direct causes of the shortages. But a military intervention would be a disaster on every possible level. It's all good, Mark, because I didn't know we ever actually lifted the embargo. I thought the embargo was just into perpetuity throughout eternity. But now that I think about it, I do remember that being like pretty big in the news cycle. Obama ending the embargo. I remember that was a thing because I remember people were excited to get Cuban cigars or whatever. But yeah, It's crazy because if communism was like really fucking up the country that bad, you would think we would just like lift all the restrictions to the country and like let them fail. But for some reason they seem really threatened by this little island. I have no idea, but democratic socialists value free speech, multi-party elections, independent trade unions, and workplace democracy. We shouldn't deny that Cuba's society is flawed in these and other ways, nor should we assume that every frustrated Cuban who's taken to the street is a CIA puppet or an advocate of privatizing Cuba's healthcare system, and I said this earlier. But anyone who thinks U.S. intervention would lead to better outcomes is not vastly... Blah. Anyone who thinks U.S. intervention would lead to better outcomes and not vastly worse ones has lost touch with reality, and I would agree with that statement. To see what kind of government U.S. meddling would produce, look at neighboring Haiti, yikes, whose president the U.S. Marines removed in 2004. Anyone who believes U.S. intervention in Cuba would bring about a stable, prosperous, liberal democracy first needs to explain why Haiti is racked by dystopian levels of poverty, inequality, corruption, and political violence. And it's not even just Haiti. There's like, if you throw a dart in South America, on a map of South America, you might hit a country that the U.S. meddled in their elections and fucked everything up and installed some like fascist puppet ruler that would be more pliable to U.S. demands. You know what I mean? If anything, a serious attempt to topple Cuba's government to impose a U.S.-friendly alternative could end up looking less like America's ugly but relatively short-term interventions in Haiti and more like the war in Vietnam. Facts. Because you know those people are not going to let us come over there and do whatever. Cuba's government came to power through a popular revolution that still has a significant base of support. It's preposterous to think that the United States could overthrow that government without large numbers of people taking up arms in response. And that's the funny thing about like Fox News and stuff, because Fox News is literally showing pictures and videos of pro-government protests and saying that they're actually anti-government, because Fox News is their job is not to inform the public. Their job is to manufacture consent. But anyway. America's forever war in Afghanistan has been going on for almost 2 decades. The waves of bloodshed and chaos caused by the 2003 invasion of Iraq are still with us. That anyone could believe in 2021 that intervening in Cuba would make things better is a chilling testament to the blinding power of ideology. And what he's saying there is that the blinding power of ideology is people that don't actually observe reality, people who don't care about facts. You know, the whole Ben Shapiro meme, facts don't care about your feelings. These people's feelings don't care about facts. They just believe that America is the world police, that we spread democracy, that we can do no wrong abroad. Our foreign policy must be that we need to just straight up imperialism. We need to invade every country and turn every country into like America, because they think that that freedom represents personal individual liberty, when really the freedom that America brings these countries is the same freedom we have here in America, which is a Starbucks down the street from a Starbucks, across the street from a Starbucks, around the corner from a Barnes & Noble with a Starbucks in it, which is up the block from a McDonald's. But anyway, if the U.S. government truly wanted to help the Cuban people, there's an easy and obvious way: end the sanctions. Every single one of the shortages that protesters are talking about has at least been worsened by the U.S. embargo. The answer isn't more intervention, it's less. Right-wing anti-communists often want to have it both ways. On the one hand, they deny that the embargo is a significant contributing factor to hardships in Cuba, arguing that the shortages are almost entirely caused by the flaws in Cuba's system. On the other hand, they insist that it's essential the embargo stay in place. But why? If it really has no major effect on Cuba's economy, how could it be an important tool to pressure the Cuban government to meet U.S. demands? If it really isn't exacerbating the island's economic problems, why not prove that by normalizing trade relations? Thank you for the like, Jelani. Thank you for the like, Jarkreet. Last month, the United Nations voted overwhelmingly to call on the United States to lift the embargo. So imagine that. Only the United States and Israel voted no. Imagine that. Ukraine, Colombia, and Jair Bolsonaro's Brazil were the only abstentions, and 184 nations voted yes. It's time to listen to the world's condemnation. The embargo needs to end. And this is another thing where it's funny because the United States is accountable to no one. We do whatever the fuck we want on the world stage, assuming that the United Nations isn't just going along with what we do anyway. But that said, to get back to the last paragraph in this piece, or the third to last paragraph, the sanctions and the embargo in Cuba exist solely to create conditions that will exacerbate whatever shortages that already exist there, that will push the people there to protest and overthrow the government, just like they're doing right now. It's literally in America's foreign policy playbook. You impose sanctions on a country so the country starts starving, and you hope that in the country's starvation, the citizens of that country are not informed enough to understand that the reason why they're starving is because of the United States of America, and that it's actually because of the regime that rules that particular country, and then they overthrow it, and then you have a power vacuum that you can just come in and swoop in and immediately install whatever puppet dictator that you want, and you can get whatever resources out of that country you desire, whether it's, oil, gold, other commodities, human labor, cheap labor, it's whatever. I'll read one more piece about Cuba really quick. And yeah, it's not too long. Check it out. This is by Branko Marcetic. I've not heard of this person, but the title of this is pretty in your face, pretty clickbaity. Regime change advocates don't care about Cubans. If people like Joe Biden and Marco Rubio actually cared about Cuban lives, they would lift the crippling blockade and end the 62-year-old U.S. war against Cuba. And just really quick, I gotta say, because I got the spinner going. I found my Batman spinner in my car not too long ago. So I'm gonna be less fidgety because I'm spinning while I read. As the streets of Cuba are filled with some of the largest anti-government protests in the country's history, we're seeing a predictable, reckless response from U.S. policymakers. That would be the exact same one we see anytime one of the Washington foreign policy blob's many official enemies face unrest. Calls for the U.S. government to intervene and hopefully help topple the government in power. The White House must move swiftly was the demand from Democratic Representative Val Demings, currently trying to poach Marco Rubio's Senate seat, later insisting that U.S. policy must support the protesters, their safety, and their right to self-determination. Which is funny because we just came off of a summer of the largest protest in American history where the government did not meet a single demand from any of the protesters, right? In fact, Joe Biden went out of his way to state that he would not be defunding the police, which is crazy that right-wingers are continuing to move with the talking point that the police have been defunded, the police have been abolished or whatever, when literally the opposite is true. Matter of fact, America's top cop, quote unquote, is his vice president in the form of Kamala Harris. Bubble popper is nice. Kamala Harris. So anyway, right-wing Florida officials like Miami Mayor Francis Suarez and Representative Carlos Jimenez called for the international community, led by the United States, to intervene and to lead on promoting a free and democratic #Cuba. Cute. 4 other Florida mayors wrote to President Joe Biden asking that the U.S. government intervenes to help the Cuban people break the chains that have kept them in shackles for so many years. Most of these calls are, by necessity, vague. And I was going to get into that is all this shit needs to be vague. They can't just come out and say, hey, let's fucking invade Cuba, assassinate their fucking president or leader or whatever, and then just set up a puppet government. You know what I mean? They can't just come out and say that. They got to make it seem like they're doing, helping out these freedom fighters, these rebels, fight back against the oppressive dictatorship regime or whatever, just like they did with the Mujahideen. It's one of the oldest tricks in America's playbook that I can't believe we continue to do. And how you doing, Al Gal, my pal? Good to see you. After all, whatever legitimate grievances Cubans have with their government would likely be eclipsed by the news of a Washington-led regime change operation coming to their shores. But make no mistake, all this is the typical wink and a nod vernacular of Washington regime change. Let's set aside the fact that, at least for now, all the reporting shows the protests are overwhelmingly motivated by the very issues, food and medicine shortages, high prices, and other economic stresses that have been exacerbated by the decades-long U.S. blockade against Cuba and Donald Trump's added turning of the screws over his term, which Joe Biden has kept in place. Tonight's a pretty busy protest night. That doesn't surprise me. I know there's protests in Cuba, obviously. I'm reading about that now. But there's also Haiti. There's it's a lot. There's a lot of protests happening right now. But where was I? Oh yeah. In reality, Washington is already intervening and has been for decades. If U.S. officials actually cared about Cuban lives, they could lift the crippling blockade that was explicitly designed to bring about the kind of unrest we're seeing now. And I mentioned that in reading the last article, is that the embargo and the blockade and all that stuff is literally designed to create the conditions that we're seeing now in the hopes that the population will be more receptive to American intervention militarily. Let us also note the irony of U.S. officials, particularly on the right, backing regime change in a country because it's experiencing mass protests, part of which are driven by unhappiness with its government's pandemic response. If this was a consistently applied standard, then the EU and Canada should have invaded the United States to remove Trump during last year's massive George Floyd-inspired protests, which were motivated both by widespread repression of ordinary Americans by police forces and by the presence of a leader widely labeled authoritarian. Meanwhile, it's precisely the U.S. right that can take the most credit for the world's worst pandemic death toll, and that is continuing to spread lies about the virus and vaccine. And that's what's so insane about the right wing and conservatives, and gets back to what I was saying earlier about the power of ideology, is that you have these people that will sit up there and cap about how we need to topple the Cuban government because of the mass protests happening there, when those are the same people who would vote to run over protesters in the street. What's up, Key Brown? These are the same people that vote to run over protesters in the street with their vehicles legally, right? People that are going to criticize the Cuban government for not providing the COVID vaccine to its people, like 5 minutes before they claim that the COVID vaccine is actually not good for you and fucking makes you gay and makes you autistic and, you know, is how Bill Gates spies on you with 5G or whatever. Like, it's just, they have no actual concrete beliefs. It's literally just whatever their corporate owners want them to believe at the time. Unfortunately, even with all this, it's still easy for well-meaning people to be seduced by humanitarian appeals in supporting the regime change operations plotted in Washington. For those, a simple history lesson is in order. The operative example, as ever, is Iraq. After promising a swift victory against its dictatorship, a friendly welcome by a grateful populace, and a seamless transition to democracy, the country was instead plunged into a civil war. U.S. soldiers served as targets of attacks for years, and its fragile young democracy was undermined in favor of a budding authoritarian by the very same Joe Biden who's now exhorting the Cuban people's clarion call for freedom. Even a more arm's-length strategy to topple the Cuban government would likely end in disaster. Just look at Libya, where the Obama administration intervened as part of a NATO force to ostensibly protect Libyan protesters from a bloodbath. The United States got more and more involved until it eventually helped kill Muammar Gaddafi, producing another civil war, a refugee crisis, the emergence of open-air slave markets in the country, and the mass movement of weapons across North Africa and the Middle East. As Iraq and Libya should have taught us, toppling a government or an autocrat tends to leave a power vacuum, which a variety of competing interests, groups, and individuals try to fill, and in the ensuing chaos, their differences aren't always resolved peacefully. Then you've got the fact that just because Cubans may be unhappy with their government doesn't mean they want the capitalist feeding frenzy that inevitably follows, let alone to have foreign troops squatting in their country and running their lives. The U.S. blockade doesn't mean Cubans aren't aware of what U.S. intervention meant for those other countries. One of the benefits of a nearly 100% literacy rate, and I mentioned that earlier, is that everyone in this fucking room graduated from high school with a person that could not read, right? There's someone that you knew that walked across the stage with a diploma in their hands that they could not fucking read. That's not a thing in Cuba. It's not a thing in North Korea either. But I might talk about that another time. But the idea that it's just like normal for people to go into life and go into adulthood not knowing how to fucking read is not normal. That's not good, and it's not regular. But anyway, and there are people, and while I'm on that topic, before I move on from that, there are people who directly benefit from that, because if you can't read, that means that. So I had a Latin teacher my second year at Gibbons. Fade might know him, Mr. Volo. He's kind of a fucking douchebag, but one of his euphemisms that he said resonated with me, and it stuck with me forever, to the point where it's something I even think of nowadays in my contemplating of learning other languages and my desire to read and learn more about the world around me. And that he said that words represent ideas, right? And so every word that you don't know is a thought that you are not having. And that fucking blew my little 14-year-old mind. But anyway, it's also worth remembering that no one here who's laying the groundwork for U.S. involvement in Cuba actually cares about the people themselves, which is facts. None of these conservatives care about Cuban people. If they announced tomorrow that all the Cubans were going to be coming to the border in a caravan, I feel like they would feel a little bit differently about that situation. But Exhibit A is the appalling blockade that every one of these figures, including Biden, backs, which was hindering Cuban development for decades long before COVID. For Exhibit B, look back a few years at the U.S. response to another country ruled by an authoritarian government that saw mass protests suddenly erupt: Egypt. When the Arab Spring-inspired protests plunged dictator Hosni Mubarak's government into crisis in 2011, Biden wasn't found anywhere near the side of the people, instead insisting that Mubarak not step down, even as his police were murdering hundreds of his own people and absurdly denying that he was a dictator. Thank you for the like, OCAT Gaming. Shout out to OCAT Gaming. Make sure you like and follow OCAT Gaming and Keyblade Warriors as well. Just really quick. Sorry to plug them really quick before I continue reading. Make sure you follow OCAT Gaming. Make sure you follow Keyblade Warriors. Egypt eventually devolved back into a possibly even more brutal dictatorship under Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Not that it mattered much in Washington. For imprisoning, torturing, and disappearing hundreds of pro-democracy protesters, Sisi was rewarded with renewed billions of dollars with a B worth of military aid from Barack Obama and Trump, who is now rubbing his hands at the sight of hungry Cubans rioting. As you read this, Biden is trying to send Sisi yet another $1 billion of weapons, despite his ongoing oppression of Egyptians and despite him already having imprisoned, horrifically tortured, and even killed U.S. citizens. Just recently, Biden's administration stepped in to get an Egyptian official off the hook for the abuse carried out against yet another U.S. citizen. And this is pretty obvious to most people, but it should be fairly obvious to you that your government does not care about you. Your government cares about corporate money. Your government cares about you so much as they care about your vote so that they can remain in power, so they can continue to get corporate money. But if your government cared about you, you would have socialized medicine. You would not have the literacy rate that is the way that it is. You would not have a life expectancy lower than countries like Cuba. Your government would do things for you, as opposed to just taking your money and giving it to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. But anyway, As for Cuba, the surest bet for progress will come not through the U.S. led regime change, but through the lifting of the U.S. blockade, the normalization of relations, and the end of the 62-year-old war against the country more broadly. That would mean significant progress for 11 million people in Cuba, but would be a disaster for the Marco Rubios of the world and their dreams of violent regime change. What's up, Jerson? So, yeah, that's kind of all I got on Cuba. I should mention that there is significant repression from the police force in Cuba. Ask some of the Afro-Cubans how they feel about that. You know what I mean? It's part of the reason why I'm hesitant or reluctant to really truly identify with uh, a lot of the Marxist, Leninist, or even Maoist organizations and such, because of the latent white supremacy that's just kind of inescapable. You know what I mean? There can't really be a vanguard party or anything like that in America, especially because of the fact that a lot of the people that I would be organizing with, were that to happen, wouldn't even see me as human. You know what I mean? And on that note, this is kind of a really fucked up story. That shout out to Jenna again for providing me with the story. But unions gave money to GOP lawmakers who voted to overturn the election. And I know for a fact this is definitely probably the police union because, I mean, fucking obviously. But I'm curious to see what other unions they're talking about here. So let me take a sip really quick to wet my whistle and then I'll go ahead and read this. Ever since former President Donald Trump inspired a deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, corporations have wrestled with whether or not to give money to the GOP lawmakers who tried to overturn the 2020 election results. For instance, the automaker Toyota initially defended such donations, then buckled under public pressure last week and pledged to end them. But labor unions are also a significant source of political contributions, and while they tend to steer far more money to Democrats, some spread their contributions around to both political parties, including to members of Congress who didn't want to certify Joe Biden's victory in the Electoral College. Interesting. Through May, the political action committees, the PACs, of at least 6 major unions contributed to the campaigns of 13 of the 139 House Republicans who wanted to throw out the election results of either Arizona or Pennsylvania. None of the money HuffPost identified went directly to the campaigns of the 8 GOP senators who objected, though some went to a party committee that would work to support those lawmakers. All these contributions were made after January 6th, the day Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, leading to 5 deaths. So I guess this is the list here. And the Airline Pilots Association contributed to the re-election efforts of 8 objectors. That's nuts. I won't really read I don't feel like reading this, but I'll zoom in so you can see it. Pause if necessary. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, contributed $5,000 to the campaign of Representative Jeff Van Drew, the former New Jersey Democrat who opposed the impeachment of Trump, defected to the GOP in 2019, and vowed undying support for the former president. Yikes. The International Association of Firefighters, which they just want to be cops. Let's be clear here. The firefighters are like the police's best friend, and it sucks because EMS falls under that category with like EMTs and such. But firefighters really, really like cops, and they're really conservative. So the International Association of Firefighters, arguably Biden's closest ally in the labor movement, gave money to the re-election efforts of 2 members who did not want to certify Biden's victory. Van Drew and Bob Whitman. The IAFF was the first major union to endorse Biden for president during his campaign, which is cool. You know, that's good and all, but like you can't play the centrism game with literal fascists. You know what I mean? Like you just can't. And I guess it was wrong to paint the firefighters with such a broad brush, because it's not all of them that are really conservative like that. I really fuck with cops like that, but it's enough of them. We'll say that. The International Association of Bridge, Structural, Ornamental, and Reinforcing Ironworkers, better known simply as the Ironworkers, contributed $2,500 to the campaign of Florida Representative Mario Diaz-Balart, which is confusing to me because Republicans hate infrastructure. The United Mine Workers of America gave $1,000 to the campaign of Representative Hal Rogers, the lone member of Kentucky's congressional delegation who objected to the Electoral College results. The Seafarers International Union of North America contributed $1,000 to the campaign of Florida Representative Brian Mast. And this is why I goofed, because I don't know what level of Zoom I am, but it's cool. Several unions also contributed to Republican campaign committees. While these contributions are not made directly to individual candidate campaigns, the money still ends up going to the re-election efforts of lawmakers who objected to Biden's victory. That's especially true in the House, where more than half of the GOP caucus voted to challenge the results. Wild. And I guess it's just, yeah. A report last month from the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington found that 111 of the 147 Republicans who objected to the results have reported receiving corporate money since January 6. That's not surprising to me, honestly. Really, genuinely not surprising, considering the cash grab, the corporate cash grab that was Donald Trump's presidency, Mr. Drain the Swamp. And on that note, surprise, surprise, they knew that Trump would attempt a coup after election. So that's fun. The top U.S. military officer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, was so shaken that then President Donald Trump and his allies might attempt a coup or take other dangerous or illegal measures after the November election that Milley and other top officials informally planned for different ways to stop Trump, according to excerpts of an upcoming book obtained by CNN. The book, from Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post reporters Carol Leonig and Philip Rucker, no relation, describes how Milley and the other Joint Chiefs discussed a plan to resign, one by one, rather than carry out orders from Trump that they considered to be illegal, dangerous, or ill-advised. It was a kind of Saturday Night Massacre in reverse, Leonig and Rucker write. The book, I Alone Can Fix It, scheduled to be released next Tuesday, chronicles Trump's final year as president with a behind-the-scenes look at how senior administration officials and Trump's inner circle navigated his increasingly unhinged behavior after losing the 2020 election. The authors interviewed Trump for more than 2 hours. Yikes. The book recounts how, for the first time in modern U.S. history, the nation's top military officer, whose role was to advise the president, was preparing for a showdown with the commander-in-chief because he feared a coup attempt after Trump lost the November election. Mance from Hootie and the Blowfish wrote a book. Wild, yeah. Everyone named Rucker is related to Darius Rucker. That's not even irony. It's like not even a joke. It's probably true because slavery. But anyway, the authors explain Milley's growing concerns that personnel moves that put Trump acolytes in positions of power at the Pentagon after the November 2020 election, including the firing of Defense Secretary Mark Esper and the resignation of Attorney General Billy Barr, were the sign of something sinister to come. Milley spoke to friends, lawmakers, and colleagues about the threat of a coup, and the Joint Chiefs chairman felt he had to be on guard for what might come. They may try, but they're not going to fucking succeed, Milley told his deputies, according to the authors. You can't do this without the military. You can't do this without the CIA and the FBI. We're the guys with the guns. And I've said that before. Other people have said it. Bo of the Fifth Column comes to mind. Is that we all know that Trump wanted to do a coup, but he didn't have the support of the military. He talked way too much shit about the military. He disrespected them too much. There was no way they were ever going to support him. Therefore, he just physically could not coup the government. They tried, they certainly tried, but The crazy thing is if we get like a Ron DeSantis in there, that type who knows how to schmooze and knows how to use the silver tongue, might have a little different outcome, but it's all good, Big Richie Lizzie. In the days leading up to January 6th, Leonig and Rucker write, Milley was worried about Trump's call to action. Milley told his staff that he believed Trump was stoking unrest, possibly in hopes of an excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act and call out the military. Milley viewed Trump as the classic authoritarian leader with nothing to lose, the authors write, and he saw parallels between Adolf Hitler's rhetoric as a victim and savior and Trump's false claims of election fraud. This is a Reichstag moment, Milley told aides, according to the book, The Gospel of the Fuhrer, which is an insanely conscious thing to say for United States military personnel. Ahead of a November pro-Trump Million MAGA march to protest the election results, Milley told aides he feared it could be the modern American equivalent of brown shirts in the streets, referring to the pro-Nazi militia that fueled Hitler's rise to power. Wild. I don't really want to read the rest of this. You guys want me to? If you guys want me to read it, I will. But I feel like we kind of get the picture, and it's really long, and I have a bunch more news to read. So I will move on from that. If you guys want to check it out yourself, hang on. They're not going to fucking succeed. Top generals feared Trump would attempt a coup after election, according to the new book. Is from CNN Politics. It's Mark Milley. So if you want to know what to look for, I can skim it. Yeah, that's what I kind of did, but I feel like everything I read was just reiterating what I'd already read. So tag the link. You know what I'll do? I'll post the link in stream chat. I'll post it in Twitch chat. So if you guys want to read along, there it is. I just posted it in Twitch chat. And I might just straight up post it to my Facebook page later. Matter of fact, I'll do that right now. I'll do it right now. Thank you, Ryan Robinson, for the like. So, and if you're on YouTube, I guess you're shit out of luck. So, like, I'll post it in the chat on YouTube as well. Sorry, my internet's really slow today. Okay, posted on Facebook. And let's see what else we got going on here. Am I not live on YouTube? I am live. Okay. Mute the tab. Mute the tab. Posted in YouTube chat. Cool. All right. Cool. All right. Now moving on. I'm gonna do some more news on January 6th because this is a good segue. Megyn Kelly is dead wrong about January 6th, and I have no idea what Megyn Kelly said, honestly. I don't care about Megyn Kelly as a person or as a pundit. I don't listen to Megyn Kelly. I don't watch Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly could fall off the face of the earth and nothing about my life would change. But we're going to read this and see what she said and why it's wrong. There is no question the media represented it as so much worse than it actually was, which is an absolutely in-fucking sane take. And I know people believe that, but I'm going to explain really quick, just very shortly, why that's nuts, okay? January 6th was the largest breach of American security in United States history, period. Worse than 9/11. Worse than 9/11. When I say worse than 9/11, people immediately think of the death toll, which is, you're going in the wrong direction, right? You're missing the forest for the trees. The reason why the death toll on 9/11 happened is because of the breach of security, right? And that was just some people hijacking some airplanes and flying those planes into the Pentagon, right? So imagine the breach of security that is a few hundred people straight up storming the United States Capitol. Thank you for the stars, Ryan. I appreciate you. Imagine the potential. Like if it was a bunch of foreign actors, like if there was a platoon of fucking like I don't know, like fucking Russian soldiers that did that, you would think it was the most insane shit you've ever seen in your life, and probably one of the most insane events in United States history. But because it's people that you think like you, and you think they were doing it for the cause that you support, it's no big deal for you, right? But anyway. That's Megyn Kelly, the former Fox News and briefly NBC anchor on the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Yep, that's what she said. Kelly made the comments on her podcast, Oh, How the Mighty Have Fallen, in an interview with a comedian named Chrissy Mayer. I was there. Anybody who was there on the 6th is like blown away by how like inaccurate the media coverage is, Mayer claimed on the podcast. Well, here's the thing. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. And the facts of what happened January 6th at the Capitol are indisputable. More than 500 people have been charged for their roles in the Capitol riot, which is crazy to me because I thought they were catch and release for a lot of these people. But a total of 140 police officers were injured trying to deal with the insurrectionists. 5 people died in the riot. How then exactly did the media cast the 1/6 riot as so much worse than it actually was? Was the body count of dead and injured not high enough for Kelly? Did she need more videos of rioters attacking the police with, well, just about anything they could grab? What Kelly is doing, whether intentionally or not, it's intentional, spoiler alert, is playing a part in the attempted reshaping of what actually happened that day. And conservatives have been trying to do this since January 7th, right? They've been trying to make it seem like it was just a bunch of good old boys just having a good old time. From Senator Ron Johnson's insistence that January 6th wasn't an armed insurrection, it was, to Representative Andrew Clyde's laughable claim that it was a normal tourist visit. I still can't believe he said that crazy shit. To Donald Trump's insistence over the weekend that the rioters were peaceful people, these were great people, there is a concerted effort by the former president and his allies to whitewash what really happened on January 6th, which is also crazy because, a sidebar before the sidebar, it's fascinating to me that they will oscillate between it being not that bad and it was really, really bad, but the FBI did it. It wasn't actually any Trump supporters. It was Antifa and Black Lives Matter and the FBI that did it. Like, it just goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, conservatives, right-wingers, Republicans do not have any concrete beliefs. And then now the sidebar. Senate Republicans' opposition to the creation of an independent commission to investigate the causes and effects of January 6th seems all the more short-sighted and overtly political in hindsight. Duh. Forgetting what happened, or worse, lying about what happened is a surefire recipe for it to happen again. And I don't know about you, but I'm good with just the one assault on democracy during my lifetime. And spoiler alert, it's going to happen again. It's absolutely going to happen again. There's a joke, I forget where I heard it, but the joke goes, what do you call a failed insurrection? Rehearsal. What's up, Lonely Raccoon? Speaking of dumbass Republicans, let's check out what this dumbass Ted Cruz had to say. Ted Cruz, who fled Texas for Cancun during a winter storm, was mocked for criticizing Democratic lawmakers who left the state to block GOP bills. I know this motherfucker did not open his mouth to say a fucking word. Holy shit, dude. Republicans are really like this. This is crazy. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas was mocked after he criticized Democratic lawmakers who fled the state in a walkout earlier this week, with several lawmakers pointing out that he flew to Mexico earlier this year to escape a deadly winter storm that was ravaging the state. People died. People fucking died, dude. On Monday, Democrats in the Texas House of Representatives deliberately left the state for Washington, D.C. to block Republican priorities, including a bill on voting rights, from passing in a special legislative session. So for anyone who doesn't know about that, really quick, basically, it's a filibuster. If you don't know what the filibuster is, you can Google that shit. I don't feel like explaining all of that right now, but basically, the Democrats are like filibustering the Republicans here in that they're just not going to participate in the session. If you don't have 2/3 of the legislature present, you can't vote on anything or anything like that. So they just dipped out to not particularly win or stop this legislation from passing, but I'm guessing hopefully stall it long enough for there to be some saving grace at the federal level. Have I seen a news guy who called vaccines not natural? It sounds like it. Probably was it Tucker Carlson? It's probably Tucker Carlson. But anyway, the move was to deny the legislative quorum needed to move the bills forward. Under the Texas Constitution, 2/3 of Texas lawmakers must be present for legislative business to proceed. That's what I just said, but they worded it better there. In a Tuesday interview with Fox News, Cruz called the move a political stunt made in a fit and said it was going to fail. Let's watch this. This looks interesting.
Governor Abbott said last night on local TV in Texas, he said, I will call a special session after special session after special session until election of next year. All right, I don't know if that's the fate here, but how does this end, do you think, with lawmakers leaving the state?
Well, I think it's going to end with the Texas legislature taking up and passing election integrity legislation. What you're seeing the Democrats do here is a political stunt. And, I will say it's...
And I should also say that election integrity is code for not letting people vote.
Ironic, as they were getting on their private jet to fly to Washington, D.C., they almost surely had to show identification to get on that jet. And yet they're doing this in a fit because they don't want mail-in ballots to be verified. They don't want the signatures to be verified. They don't want
all false, all lies.
Integrity steps to be strengthened in the state of Texas. This is, at the end of the day, politics, and they need to get back to doing their jobs. And one way or the other, they will. One of the things, it's interesting, Bill, one of the very first assignments I ever had back 17 years ago, when I was newly appointed as the Solicitor General of Texas, one of the first questions I ever got is the Speaker of the House of the legislature. The legislature was redistricting then, and the Democrats did the same thing.
Gerrymandering.
That time they fled for Ardmore, Oklahoma, the House members, and then shortly thereafter.
It's probably because they were gerrymandering, but anyway.
For Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the Speaker of the House asked the Attorney General, who was then Greg Abbott, my boss, he said, hey, do I have the authority to arrest fleeing legislatures, these Democrats that have left to break a quorum? And Abbott, in turn, asked me. I did the research, and it turns out the answer is yes. Under the Texas Constitution, there's a provision that explicitly gives the Speaker the authority to arrest fleeing House members. That provision is copied word for word from the U.S. Constitution. And so this stunt is going to fail. They're going to come back. There's going to be a quorum. And I believe the legislature is going to do its job and protect the integrity of elections. Ensure people can vote, but also ensure that we don't have fraud. We don't have people casting illegal votes.
So, what a dum-dum. And the Lincoln Project, a group formed by Republicans critical of former President Donald Trump, tweeted, Ted Cruz knows a thing or two about fleeing Texas. That's funny. But yeah, Ted Cruz is a hypocrite. He's fucking stupid. He sucks. He has bad hair. All that good stuff. Speaking of dumbass American politicians, let's see what's up with our boy Matt Gaetz, who apparently dropped by Britney Spears' conservatorship hearing for no discernible reason. I guess he heard that there was a woman that had no autonomy, and he was just super into that. So, Representative Matt Gaetz showed up at a rally outside a Los Angeles courthouse ahead of the latest conservatorship hearing for Britney Spears. Gaetz called the pop icon's father, Jamie Spears, a dick while speaking to her supporters. Britney has been abused by the media, she has been abused by her grifter father, and she's been abused by the American justice system, Gaetz said. Wow. Just fucking... He's really trying to regain that women's conservative vote. Oh man, I tell you what, bro. American politics is just the absolute fucking worst. Let's check this out. Speaking of creepy men, the Justice Department watchdog blasts the FBI's handling of allegations against Larry Nassar. FBI officials investigating allegations of sexual abuse by disgraced U.S. gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar violated the agency's policies by making false statements and failing to properly document complaints by the accusers, resulting in a delay in the probe into the claims, the Justice Department's Inspector General said in a scathing report Wednesday. Surprise, surprise, the FBI doesn't give a fuck about women and survivors of abuse. Wow. Jesus Christ, dude. Oh my goodness. So FBI botched that shit. He's still gonna be in jail for fucking ever, but they still botched that shit. I'm just gonna skim over these last bits of news really quick because it's almost 11. Bolsonaro almost got clapped by fucking hiccups. Look at that. This fucking idiot has to write shit down on his hands to remember things. So that's probably like a tattoo or something. I have no idea what that actually is, but this man had 10 days of hiccups and almost got clapped. The dude who stormed the Capitol, he thought it was the White House the whole time. I hate this country so much. You don't understand how much I hate America. Like, oh my God. I couldn't imagine being that fucking stupid. Although, in fairness, this is how stupid I am. When I was a kid, I'll thank you, Algal. When I was a kid, and you guys are gonna laugh at me for this one. I don't even care because we can laugh together because it was fucking stupid on my part. So when I was a kid, I thought Washington D.C. was like in Washington the state. Like we went on a field trip to the Washington Monument in like 5th grade, and I remember being like, first of all, having no concept of time, being like, damn, how the fuck are we going to drive all the way across the country? Like, why did my mom agree to this shit? I remember being on the bus for like an hour and a half, and then we looked outside and saw the Washington Monument, and my mind was just fucking blown. And that's when I realized that Washington, D.C. is like separate from Washington, the state. I was probably in like 3rd or 4th grade, maybe. I don't think it was actually 5th grade. You were 29 when you found out that narwhals are real? That's wild. Yeah, I've known about narwhals for a minute, but it's still pretty embarrassing that I didn't know that Washington, D.C. was its own thing and so close to where I was. But let's check out this dumbass Trumper. The QAnon supporter, because of course he is, Douglas Austin Jensen thought he invaded the White House, not the Capitol. I want to see this. I'm sure this will be total shit.
This is me touching the White House. This is why we're here. I am at the White House. Just so you know. Storm the White House. That's what we do.
Wild. That's, oh my goodness. That's crazy. That's fucking crazy. The White House is made of dirty cinder blocks. Thank you, Algal. All right, and this last couple bits of news. Trudeau stresses caution after state legislators demand immediately opening the U.S. and Canada border, because of course they are, because Dog, need I remind everyone that in the United States of America, the Delta variant accounts for 25% of new infections. Less than half of the country is fully vaccinated. I think it's like 45%. 99% of hospitalizations are unvaccinated people, and 100% of COVID deaths are unvaccinated people. It's just, I can't believe we're going back to opening up dining rooms and shit like that again. If I were you, I'm not you. You can make your own decisions. I'm sure you're an adult. I would be going back to mask wearing, even if I was vaccinated, if I were you, because it's only a matter of time, because of how things are, before we have vaccine resistant variants of COVID. Because we've already got the Lambda variant now too. But here's something a lot of you probably already know. If you're a full-time minimum wage worker in the United States, you cannot afford rent anywhere. Anywhere. You cannot rent anywhere. The report defines affordability as the hourly wage a full-time worker must earn to spend no more than 30% of their income on rent, in line with what most budgeting experts recommend. This year, workers would need to earn $24.90 per hour for a 2-bedroom home and $20.40 per hour for a 1-bedroom rental. That's an increase from $23.96 and $19.56 respectively from last year. The average hourly worker currently earns $18.78 per hour, the report finds, more than $6 short of the wage needed to afford a 2-bedroom rental. Given each state and locality's minimum wage, the report finds that the average minimum wage worker in the U.S. would need to work nearly 97 hours per week to afford the average 2-bedroom home. That's more than 2 full-time jobs. That's literally impossible. The pandemic exacerbated housing issues with low-wage workers facing the brunt of job loss. They were also more likely to contract COVID-19. So basically, story of the country, if you're a low-wage worker, you're getting shitted on harder than anyone else. And just some real quick world news. I guess riots happened after President Jacob Zuma's arrest. I won't get too deep or too far into this because I don't know a whole lot about South Africa, but why was Jacob Zuma arrested? Mr. Zuma was president of South Africa from 2009 until 2018, a time when alleged corruption escalated in government and the ruling African National Congress. After he resigned, a government-mandated commission started investigating some of these allegations, but Mr. Zuma repeatedly refused to testify, despite an order to do so from South Africa's Constitutional Court. On June 29th, the same court sentenced Mr. Zuma to 15 months in prison for contempt of court, and he was arrested the following week. How widespread are the riots in South Africa? Most of the violence and looting has been concentrated in Mr. Zuma's home province of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, where South Africa, I'm sure I butchered those names, but it's cool, where South Africa's economic capital Johannesburg and political capital Pretoria are located. Mobs have targeted shopping malls, factories, and warehouses, many of them in impoverished townships, where residents have been hit hard by 3 brutal waves of COVID-19 infections and government-imposed lockdowns. Dozens of people have lost their jobs. Traffic on the highway connecting the important port of Durban with Johannesburg, one of South Africa's busiest transport routes, has also been interrupted. That has led to concerns over shortages of food and other essentials and could cause disruptions to exports from some of the country's agricultural hubs and trade with other African economies as far afield as the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yikes. And this last piece of news is just for me, honestly. I know you guys probably don't care about this, but this looks pretty cool. I really want a Zero, and apparently Zero is launching a new electric motorcycle. The Zero FXE is built on the same frame as the Zero FX and the Zero FXS, but sports a completely new look thanks to its redesigned body. Inspired by Zero's futuristic concept electric motorcycle developed at the huge design firm a few years ago, the Zero FXE stays surprisingly true to the original far-out concept. Built on the FX platform, it sports the same 34 kilowatt motor and 160 kilometers of city range. That's plenty for nearly any urban commuter out there. And now the new FXE offers those specs in a much nicer looking package and with new embedded tech, shirking the dirt bike-esque look of the FXS for a futuristic flair all its own. It still looks kind of dirt bike-ish, but it looks really, really cool. A 100 miles. So 100 miles isn't a lot for like, so if you got a dirt bike with a decent gas tank, you could probably get more out of that. But for an electric vehicle and for like, if you're commuting, if you're only doing like a 15-20 mile commute anyway, that's plenty of, like my commute's 30 miles. So I could get to and from, almost on a single charge 2 days in a row. So my plan was just to charge overnight while I sleep, go to and from, and then just charge it while I'm sleeping, while I'm home, not doing shit. So I have a car. I just would like an electric vehicle, and I'm not quite ready to trade my car in for an electric car. And also, I just fucking want one. Just look at that thing. It's so badass. You can't tell me it's not badass. It looks like something out of Akira. The buffets have been open. Yikes. I remember, so we went to Dayton, Ohio, to also, thanks for coming through, Zero Up. So we went to Dayton, Ohio to check on my grandmother, in December, and like the first week of December, because, she got a cochlear implant. So we were helping her out, after that surgery. Cause I don't know if you guys know anything about, that surgery or that procedure or cochlear implants or anything. Her equilibrium was really thrown off in the aftermath of that. So she needed help from us to get around the house and stuff for the week after that. And we went out to pick up some food from a spot called Roosters. You might know it if you're out there. Some pretty decent fried chicken. And that, when I say that bitch was packed, it was like, I don't know if you guys have seen that movie Contagion, where like the doctor, the epidemiologist is out at dinner and he's watching other people like touch each other's mouths and stuff like that, and he's just like shaking, like his eyes are wide as fuck. That was me. Like my jaw was hanging, like my jaw hit the floor, because there's people at the bar with no mask on. That was the silliest provision on COVID, which is that you have to wear a mask, but it's cool. You don't have to wear one if you're eating. So like, I don't know. America is really fucking dumb. We've botched this COVID shit about as bad as you possibly could. The only way we could have botched it further is if we went like full on Tanzania or something like that and just left everything completely open and denied that it even existed throughout. It's just, I don't know. It's pretty crazy. But that's it for the news. I'm going to end the stream now and come back in about 10 minutes to play some Hunt Showdown, probably, I think is what I want to play. So thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate you. For anyone who doesn't know why I'm doing this, I'm kind of doing this for my YouTube sake. I feel like it's much less daunting for people when they see YouTube videos and VODs and past streams and stuff to see like 30 minutes to an hour as opposed to 2 hours or 3 hours. And it just makes it nice and neat and clean for people who only care about the news. You have a video that just contains all the news and all my content on the news and stuff. And then you have a stream of just video games. So it separates it for both parties. If you don't care about the news, you just want to watch me play video games, you could do that. If you don't care about video games, you just want to watch me discuss the news with me, you can totally do that. You'll be out of town. That's cool, Jenna. Safe travels. I hope everything is good with you. I appreciate you sending me the news regardless. I'll always shout you out. You've been a crazy good supporter of mine. I appreciate you. And yeah, I hope I'll see you Monday. So thanks everyone. I'll see you guys Friday for the community cuth. I'll also have some news Friday. Like I said, if you want to stick around and watch me play video games, I will be ending the stream, but I will be coming back in like 5-10 minutes. Probably won't be long at all. I might honestly just end the stream and start it up again once I get my stream title and everything typed in. So thanks everyone. I stream Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the news. Then by like 11 to quarter after 11 is when I start playing video games. Monday nights, I do Mortal Kombat ESL tournaments on the PS4. And Fridays, I do community King of the Hill events on Mortal Kombat 11 as well. So if you want to play against me or you want to play in the community, you're more than welcome to do so. If you just drop your PSN ID in the chat, whatever chat you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, whatever, I'll see it. And yeah, that's it for the news. I'll see you guys in a minute with some Hunt Showdown games.